Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903. All right, well, 2022 is going to be a critical year for America. AMAC, the Association of Mature American Citizens, along with their nearly 2 million members. The fight to stop out-of-control spending in the president's Build Back Better scheme is far from over, and Congress is plotting more legislation that could hurt our seniors. The midterm elections will be a battle for freedom versus socialism. Unlike liberal groups, AMAC is America's conservative, action-oriented 50-plus organization fighting hard every day here in Washington and across the nation for our seniors. So I'm urging you to choose AMAC now. You will receive all of the great membership benefits, including AMAC discounts on hotels, travels, and restaurants, and your membership will support your conservative values. So go to amac.us/Ellis. That's amac.us/ELLIS to become an AMAC member now.
As a constitutional law attorney, former senior legal advisor, and personal counsel to President Donald J. Trump, Jenna Ellis believes in the rule of law and the importance of integrity in our elections. And she's ready to tackle the big cultural and legal issues facing America. This is the Jenna Ellis Show. Here is your host, Jenna Ellis.
Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Jenna Ellis Show. I'm Jenna Ellis, and we always want to talk about issues that are plaguing our culture, especially things like human trafficking and how the Christian worldview mandates that Christians get involved with this, and how topics like biblical traditional roles, like authentic masculinity, femininity, how that intersects and actually is required to be responsive to some of these really major issues like human trafficking. So for this discussion and a whole host of this conversation is my good friend and author, Alan Smyth. He is the author of the book, Men Fight For Me, The Role of Authentic Masculinity in Ending Sexual Exploitation and Trafficking. So Alan, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Jen. I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start first off with the whole idea and the whole cultural pervasive problem of human trafficking. I mean, a lot of people know that it exists. They may want to ignore it, but what really is going on with human trafficking today, and why is this such an important issue that you want to raise attention to?
Yeah, absolutely. Excuse me. I just saw a stat just recently, a fresh stat that said there's as many as 50 million slaves, and it's called the modern day slavery via human trafficking. 50 million worldwide, people being compelled, forced, fraudulently coerced to do something they don't want to do. And they're victims of human trafficking. And so it's not a small issue globally. And it's not a small issue here in our country. Because the United States is a large producer, maybe the largest producer of sexual content, pornography, and other kinds of exploitation. There's no surprise that sex trafficking is a major problem here in our country. And You mentioned the biblical worldview and what Christians' responsibility is. We can have that conversation all day long, absolutely. And I'd say it's even bigger than that, if you will. While people with a faith perspective are compelled to be involved in this fight, it's a humanitarian crisis that's happening in our midst, and all people, regardless of a faith perspective, should be and need to be involved.
Oh, of course. And everyone, regardless of their faith, should recognize that coercing and compelling any human being to be subject and victimized by human trafficking is necessarily morally wrong and evil. And of course, Christians would have a biblical perspective on that and reasons for the measurable difference between right and wrong, good and evil. And it's interesting how those who are not Christians and who are separated and may have other faiths or may buy into secular humanism have this idea that, of course, human trafficking is wrong, but they are okay with as they describe it, the moral permissibility of pornography, prostitution, and some of those other exchange for sex kind of businesses. And so it's interesting to see where they draw the line and why. Because if it is an arbitrary line, then there's really just an argument for policy or for criminalization of things like human trafficking. And it's only the Christian worldview that would explain, okay, there is an objective moral truth to a lot of these issues. And so this is not just our collective judgment. This isn't just what we as a society agree to as the difference between right and wrong and good and evil. We actually have a biblical moral standard that is fixed, it's objective, and it comes from the divine lawgiver, God himself. And so when you're looking at these types of issues with human trafficking, you mentioned in your book that pornography does play a large role in getting the customer base that then leads to this. How are you seeing that in terms of how the United States is participating in this just horrendous behavior?
Yeah, pornography is a tragically misunderstood crime that's happening out there, because what most people are unaware of when they're looking at their screen or their tablet or something, oftentimes a married guy, I know there's ladies that participate as well, will be looking at it after hours. What they don't understand is that a huge percentage, the majority of people that you're seeing in pornography, are there against their will in some way, shape, or form. They are coerced in some way, and in some ways, actually outright trafficked into that movie studio. And when I say trafficked, we can break that down a little bit, but that basically means they have no choice whatsoever. They're being forced to be there to experience some egregious non-consensual sex. I know you're a lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm pretty sure non-consensual sex is called rape. So what most people don't understand is that they're looking at their screen, receiving some sort of gratification, some sort of enjoyment. They're actually watching people being raped. That's what's happening on that screen more often than not. And the problem is, among many, is that there's no indicator, there's no banner, there's no button. You have no way of knowing who's there completely against their will. In fact, who is even a minor, if that adds anything to it, and who is there, quote unquote, consensually. So there's a big problem with pornography. It's just a crime scene is what it is. There should be yellow police tape around your computer, guys and ladies, but guys, as I speak to guys a lot, about the crime scene that you're participating in. And then the other part of it, when we think about how it feeds human trafficking, Jenna, what the average age of exposure, I think, is 8 or 9 years old, the last number I saw. So we're desensitizing future buyers and future victims as to how the world works. An 8 or 9 year old brain is seeing something, images, actions they were never meant to see at all. And it's conditioning them for what they can expect, how the guys should treat women, and how the young girls can expect to be treated. And so it's completely out of bounds in every way you can possibly imagine, in my opinion.
Yeah, and this is just yet another example of commoditizing human relationships and commoditizing what the Bible would describe as, the most intimate relationship in marriage and the purpose of marriage. And there's so many other issues in marriages with pornography, those types of counseling issues. But even as you describe this as a crime scene, I mean, I would hope that anyone listening to this, if that's an issue for them with pornography, then that would give you pause and a view maybe that's a little different than what you think you're watching. Because I don't think anyone who willingly participates in, or the average person. I mean, there are definitely some people that are more deviant sexually than others, but for the average person who's watching porn, they don't think of it that way. They don't think of this as being a major marketplace for human trafficking. And so those statistics are really alarming. But Alan, you also mentioned, in your book, I mean, you're calling out men. That's the title right up front. It's, men, please help, fight for me. And, so the title, Men Fight for Me. And you said most often to men, and you talk about this idea of authentic masculinity and seeing the culture and how much we are tearing down and trying to blur the lines between men and women, what gender and sexuality is, what marriage is, all of these things that deal with human sexuality. How do you define and describe authentic masculinity?
Yeah, there's a narrative out there that is being pushed that any masculinity is therefore toxic masculinity. It's like it's politically incorrect to even say that there's a healthy version of masculinity or that you're a man. And what is a man? What is a woman? There's all this craziness that's going on out there. And so when my son, who's now 30, was 5 years old, me and a couple of buddies got together who also had young boys. And we said, okay, guys, how are we going to do this? How are we going to raise this little boy to become a good, strong man who's out there in the world? And the first order of business was to define it. What's the target? What are we aiming for? What do we want our little boys to understand? And we came up with a 4-pillar definition of authentic masculinity, which we detail in the book. And just briefly, I'll just say them. Number one, the authentic man, the real man. What's a real man? There's no agreed upon definition. No one knows if it's a certain age or as a little boy has sex at some point. Now you're a man. Did you graduate something? Nobody knows. So we said, we got to define it. We got to give our kids the gift of clarity. Number one is he accepts responsibility. A real man steps up and accepts the responsibilities right in front of him. And then maybe he looks a little beyond that and takes responsibility for some of the bigger problems in his community or the world. Number two, he leads courageously. We need courageous leaders out there. An authentic man, someone who's living out authentic masculinity, is leading courageously. He's leading his community around him, his city, his country, the world. He's offering courageous leadership. It's going to take courage to stand in front of, and particularly this issue of human trafficking, multi-billion dollar worldwide criminal enterprise. It's going to take courage to step in front of the rich and powerful people that are behind it. He lives a life of service. A real man is here to give, not to take. He's saying, how much can I give? How much can I serve? Not the other way around. A lot of guys have it twisted out there. How much can I get? How much can I control? How much can I own? A real man is here to serve. And then the last one, he understands who he is, like on the internal, is more important than what he does. Pick whatever profession. If you can sing and dance, great. If you're good at sports, awesome. If you're smart, you want to run a company, great. Do all that. But what's most important, we wanted our little boys to understand what's most important is the internal, not the external. It's character and integrity and honesty and all those things that make a real man a real man. So my definition, to answer your question, is an authentic man, someone who's practicing authentic masculinity, is living out all of those pillars. And your listeners might want to add one of your own. You might want to take one away. The important thing for our young boys is to give them some clarity. Are we running a marathon or is it 100 yards? That's a very different race. What are we doing here? Where's the finish line? And that's the finish line, in my opinion. And by the way, that's a world I want to live in, with a whole bunch of men living like that. There's no room for exploitation and trafficking. There's no room for crime sprees. There's no room for all the madness we see played out every single day on our TV. If we cross the tipping point and there's enough strong men living to add power and peace, they're not here to oppress. They're not here to control. They're here to serve. They're here to lead, and they're here to build up, not take down. We'll be in a much better place.
Yeah, so well said. And, as a woman and someone who can define that I am a woman,
Right.
I appreciate that there are differences between men and women, and that comes from each of us being made as human beings, made in the image of God, having inherent dignity and worth, and that God made us distinct and unique. I mean, even within, whether we categorize, men versus women, parents versus children, or this type of person versus that type of person, we all have distinct innate characteristics, but we all share the same fundamental value and worth. And I think that for the left and a lot of people, as you mentioned, who are trying to blur the lines and say, there is no difference. We can't really articulate and pinpoint what is masculinity because that's on a spectrum. And, whether you tend to have more female characteristics versus traditional masculinity, that's just a social construct. Well, I would push back on that narrative as you've described, because we know innately there are differences between men and women. I mean, when we look at women's sports and men who are trying to engage in women's sports, and it's unfair because their bodies are just built biologically different. And, when it comes to things like pornography and human trafficking, we get no more clear example of the biological differences. And so to say that somehow masculinity is an arbitrary standard, I think you're right to say we need to have a goal and a target and some very clearly defined parameters for what is a biblical man and what does God require of men and what should society expect from a good man. And, if we look to scripture and we look at the characteristics that God has given in leadership, because you mentioned leadership as one of those pillars. I mean, God has given the man to be the leader of the family, the protector, the provider. He's also given men the position of authority in the ecclesiastical order of the church. And in civil society, he provides no such distinction in terms of gender and or sex, which the two are simultaneous, even though we're trying to redefine those in civil society. But in terms of civil society leadership, we don't see those distinctions. But that's because civil society is just to protect the other two institutions. And so as you're looking at where the church is, Alan, in this, and the men who are part of the church, where do they stand, or are they even engaged in issues like this? And wanting to really tell other men, listen, you've got to not engage in pornography. You can't be part of human sex trafficking. We have to engage these types of issues as sin.
Some churches and pastors and elder boards are doing everything they can, and they're doing a great job. We see a lot of support from some churches. However, my fear and my maybe assessment is that far too many churches are taking a more comfortable path, one that is going in line with some of the social narrative, because maybe there are a lot of pastors and churches that don't want to upset the apple cart too much. They're trying to build their church, not have people leave the church. And there's a bunch of soft Christians sitting in the audience that want to be comfortable, and they want to be safe, and they want to be told that they're doing great and God loves them, and God does love them. But also we're called to challenge and resist evil. And your basic church on a Sunday or whatever day, I don't know, 90%, 80%. I don't know how many men in the audience are looking at pornography on a regular basis. And if the pastor makes it real uncomfortable saying we shouldn't be doing this, probably a lot of those people will leave and go to another church where they're not saying it. So when it comes down to my authentic masculinity, I'm calling all churches and leaders of churches to step up and be strong and lead courageously, accept responsibility, serve, focus on the interior, not the exterior. Those things that I just described, they're kind of faith neutral in a way, but all of them have their roots in scripture. All of them could be seen through a biblical lens, but they don't have to be seen through a biblical lens. They're just good ways of living.
Yeah. And I mean, ultimately, as Christians, we would say they are part and parcel of the Christian worldview, because only is the Christian worldview and the biblical position inherently consistent on issues of morality and truth. But we know from the Bible that the general revelation to all of mankind and common grace leads everyone to at least understand, because the word of God is written in our hearts, that there are things that we all say are evil. And yet, there are people, as you mentioned, sitting in audiences in churches that are participating in all kinds of evil. And even people probably listening to the show may be getting a little bit uncomfortable, like, oh, why did I tune in today? This is a really uncomfortable topic of conversation. But it's one of those things that if we truly value every human being made in the image of God having inherent dignity and worth, it's not just an issue of pro-life or things that we can say, oh, well, we'll be humanitarian in other ways, because it's pretty comfortable in churches, or at least in most churches, to be pro-life. But there's almost a disassociation from men on that issue, even though they should be the ones that are even more outspoken about life as the leaders of families. But so we kind of pick and choose some of those issues that are maybe more comfortable or more popular to gravitate towards in terms of policy. So how would you suggest that pastors and church leaders talk about this type of issue in their church, just from a practical perspective, not even, obviously the biblical perspective is what they want to teach on, but just from practical aspects that you've observed and that you encourage other men so that they cannot participate in this, this kind of behavior?
That's a great question. And I welcome anyone to send me an email. You go to our little website around the book called fightforme.net, and there's a contact button. You can send me an email, and I'd love to talk to anyone offline about all of this, any of this. And I especially welcome church staff and pastors and board members. As all of us, whether it's a church or just your family or individual, what you care about by what shows up in your calendar and your checkbook. How do you allocate your time and your money? That's what you care about. And I don't even have to ask you, Jenna, what do you care about? If you would just show me your calendar and your checkbook, I'll let you know what you care about. So my word to churches, coming back to your question, is there should be anti-trafficking conversation. Have someone like me or anyone else come in and speak on it. You at least should allocate at least a weekend a year to this, at least a Sunday out of 52, bring in some anti-trafficking work. And it should show up in your budget, your church budget. You should be allocating some of your resources towards people that are on the ground in the front line fighting. That's the practical thing. And then we can go a lot further than that. There's a lot of churches that are going a lot further than that, but at least that. Let's at least check the box of having some time and some money going towards anti-trafficking work. And then we can talk about what more we can do. Is there a special Christmas offering that you do? Is there some kind of another thing that you might want to incorporate anti-trafficking work in organizations? And I work for Saving Innocence. I'm the executive director. There's not a fundraising or a recruitment call, but if you don't know of any anti-trafficking agencies, find us, hit me up. I'd love to brainstorm with you. If you have someone in some other part of the country or the world that you already know about, find out from them what they need and then meet the need. Get your church resources, your people involved. They need to know about this. This is evil personified. If the church can't be about anti-trafficking, I don't even know them what we're talking about.
Well, exactly. And this is where, the Bible talks about the church being the humanitarians in society. And unfortunately, in America, especially, we've seen that as the church has really become more of the corporate institution, and they are more for profit than nonprofit. They are more for life coaching than they are discipling. They're more for TED Talks than sermons. Then you also see that we have abdicated the role and responsibility of the church to the government to be humanitarian. And so we need to reclaim that as Christians. As individuals, we can choose where to give our money, give our time, give our conversation, give so much in service. And we need to be doing that not just in the church and in that setting. And of course, everyone should be a part of a church body as a Christian. We're called to do that. We're required, in fact, to do that. We're commanded in Scripture to be part of a local church. But then also to be part of civil society in the sense that we as individuals can participate in this as well. And so for people who maybe aren't part of a local church, but they then want to help to end human trafficking, they want to help this type of education, what can they do and where can they give their time and resources?
Step number one is to become more educated on what it is and what it isn't. There's a lot of misconceptions, misunderstandings. And now in the last really couple of years, there's more and more conversation, documentaries, things about it. So there is more information available. So step number one, take a deep dive and get more educated. And I humbly offer the book, Men Fight For Me. I partnered with a bunch of survivors of trafficking. They're telling their stories. And it says men's in the title of the book, but it really isn't exclusively for men. There's a lot of women reading it and loving it and learning a lot about it. But there is a good 20% with my male voice challenging men to look at things they haven't seen and kind of challenging them. Get the book. Proceeds go to survivors. So I humbly can just say everyone should buy a case of books and give them to everybody at this Christmas time. Get more educated. Go down the rabbit hole of Google. Search things out. Watch some documentaries and get an understanding what's happening. And then the very next practical step, and I kind of already alluded to it, find an anti-trafficking organization near you. There is one somewhere. look on their website, call them up, send them an email. How many staff do you have? 6, 10, 20? What is it? Next time you go to the store, throw a Starbucks gift card or any gift card in your basket, one for everybody on their staff. Send it in the mail to them. Get their address off the website. Cheering you guys on. Thanks for this work. Let me know what else I can do. Send it to them. Just little baby steps. Like literally everyone who just heard me say that can do that. Everybody can do that. And I'd start there, wrestle with it, stay awake at night. After you've read this book or taken a deep dive in some of the things, you're going to lose some sleep. And don't run from that. Lean into it. Somewhere in the darkness, God will speak to you. He'll whisper what your next move is. I'm pretty sure there's room for you in this fight, and we need everybody to get involved one way or the other, and you can do something. Everybody can.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's such a great point that, don't run from the knowledge of what's really going on out there, because I feel like a lot of people, because it's such a dark and very,
Yeah.
dirty thing to talk about, people don't want to engage because they want to just be separate and apart from the reality of what goes on in the world. And unfortunately, the people who are victims and being trafficked, even at this moment, that's their life and they're living it. And they need you and me to not only be praying for the end of this, for our culture to reject all of, what's really toxic is not masculinity. It's toxic participation in the evil perversions that can become the sexual licentiousness. And we need to be separate and apart from that. God calls Christians to be set apart, to be sanctified. That's what sanctification means, and to not participate in that in any way, but to be called out from what the world is doing. And so, Alan, I really appreciate so much your dedication to this work, and for calling out pastors and men especially, and women as well. And women should be encouraging the men in their lives, not just their husbands or not just their boyfriends, but, all of the men in their life and themselves as well. If, some women are also engaged in pornography, to make sure that they are holding each other accountable. I mean, that's the whole point of the church as well, not only so that we can grow in the grace and knowledge of the Lord, but also so that we can have accountability with our brothers and sisters in Christ. And so where again can people find you, find your book, and participate and also pray for you?
Thank you so much for that. Go to savinginnocence.org. I'm executive director of an anti-trafficking agency based in Los Angeles, but we work nationally and now recently internationally. We'd love to have you on board. There's 5 or 6 videos you can watch right there. And if you wanted to contribute in some way, we'd take it. You can also follow us on social media at Saving Innocence. And then for this book, we made a separate website called fightforme.net. Go to that website and poke around. There's a lot of help, resources. We created little interviews, video interviews with a lot of the contributors of the book. This would be part of the deep dive to really get to know and understand a little bit more about this problem. You can find a lot on that website as well. Between those 2 websites, that's a lot of education that you can lean into. At Fight For Me Book is a social media. You can email me off that website. And love for you to pick up this book and get it to the men in your life or anyone, because there's an important message that's being shared that hasn't been shared enough. As I mentioned, women are loving it, but a survivor-informed male, that's me, challenging and calling out other men and helping them understand. It's not man-shaming or bashing. It's come along with me on this journey. Let's do this together. Let me share with you some things that I've learned. Let me introduce you to some heroes along the way. And somewhere in the middle of it, God is going to pierce your heart as he did mine. As a survivor once said, it's in the book, I needed someone to fight for me. That's where the title of the book comes. Okay, man, we're the biggest part of this problem. We're most of the buyers, we're most of the sellers. And if we're not doing that, we're just passively allowing it to happen right under our nose. So there's a place for all men to step up and join this fight, because I needed someone to fight for me. So, a survivor of trafficking, who's with me? Let's go.
Awesome. Well, Alan Smyth, thank you so much for joining me today. And I hope that everyone picks up that book and gets engaged and involved, and really appreciate your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Legacy Precious Metals is the company that I trust to give you good and patient counsel for investing in your retirement. The Biden administration has caused a financial crisis, and they have no clue how to fix it. Oil prices have skyrocketed, and when oil prices go up, not only do your expenses go up, but the cost of transportation and shipping spikes, leading the prices of goods to rise. And and we are already seeing record inflation. That's the last thing that we need. Our economy is in trouble, and you need to take steps to protect yourself. If all your money is tied up in stocks, bonds, and traditional markets, you may be vulnerable. So gold is one of the very best ways to protect your retirement. No matter what happens, you own your own gold. It's real, it's physical, and it's always been valuable since the dawn of time. Call Legacy Precious Metals today at 866-528-1903 or visit them online at legacypminvestments.com. That's legacypminvestments.com, where you can download the free investor's guide. You can also go to my Facebook page, Jenna Ellis. I am a public figure on Facebook, and I just posted yesterday a really great interview with the president of Legacy Precious Metals, who is discussing why you need to start your retirement account even if you're in your 20s or 30s. There is always a great time to protect your retirement and invest, just like you want to protect your health over the long term. So go to Legacy Precious Metals at legacypminvestments.com or call 866-528-1903. MyPillow is having their biggest sheet sale of the year. You all have helped build MyPillow into the amazing company that it is today. Now, Mike Lindell, the inventor and CEO, wants to give back exclusively to you, his listeners. The Percale bed sheet set is available in a variety of colors and sizes, and they are all on sale. So, for example, the queen size is regularly priced at $89.98, but is now only $39.98 with our listener promo code Jenna, Jenna. So order now, because when they're gone, they're gone. The Percale bed sheets are breathable and have a cool and crisp feel. These come with a 10-year warranty and a 60-day money-back guarantee, so don't miss out on this incredible offer. There's a limited supply, so be sure to order now. You can call 1-800-564-8475 and use the promo code Jenna, or go to mypillow.com/Jenna. You can click on the radio listeners square and use the promo code Jenna. That's Jenna. Thank you so much to all of Mike Lindell's listeners and listeners of this podcast for making sure to support MyPillow and using our exclusive listener promo code Jenna. That's Jenna.